everybody, and welcome back. I am so thrilled to have here Dr. Tina Schermer Sellers. She is a therapist, a sex educator, speaker, author, mother, and wife. She has PhD in clinical sexology and does formal research on the effect of sexual shame on couples' intimacy. She writes a blog. She has an online community called Thank God for Sex. She speaks regularly throughout the year around the country. She published a couple of books and established the Northwest Institute on Intimacy. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
And I really want to start by you defining sexual shame. I've heard you defining it before, and the definition is just so spot on. So let's start there, and we'll carry on the unraveling what it means.
Right. Yeah. Well, sexual shame is so rampant, and it's in the lives of so many people. In fact, I would say, Brene Brown talks about shame, and she says that we all have it. And I would go so far as to say that most people have sexual shame. And that's certainly true here in America. And in most countries, I would say, that are not comfortable with sexuality. So if you are not comfortable with sexuality, your parents are not comfortable with sexuality, then you are going to have sexual shame, because as you are developing, your curiosity comes that you're curious about your body, of course, because you're curious about your world. And that curiosity begins to emerge before you're even a year old. And you discover your genitals, which is one of the primary pleasure areas of your body. And if your parents or your caregivers aren't comfortable with that, you're going to begin to get in trouble about that. And that will be the beginning of being shamed for that, because it's a natural curiosity, but you're getting in trouble. So that's not going to make any sense to you. And so whenever we get in trouble for a natural curiosity, a natural thing that's happening, the only meaning we can make of that is that something is wrong with us, our person, our personhood, right? And so this happens hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times as we're developing and growing. So it becomes a deeply seated understanding about us that something is profoundly wrong with us. And it gets deeply tied into religion, Western religion. But ironically, we did not study sexual shame, have a operational definition for sexual shame until 2017. That was the first time that somebody actually did a qualitative study to look at what is the human impact of sexual shame. And I was fortunate enough to be on the dissertation committee of the person who did that research. She had been studying my work for a long time, and she thought she would do research on religious sexual shame. But when she got into the literature and realized that there hadn't been anybody to do research on sexual shame, she realized she had to start there, which was true. And so she did that. So I will actually read the operational definition of sexual shame, because it is important, I think, to hear what came out of the research, because it is really stunning. When I saw it in black and white, I'd been seeing it clinically for my entire career, but I think something about seeing it in black and white really shook me. I don't know what it was about seeing it done in research that was so validating to my clinical experience, but it really was. So this is what the operational definition says. Sexual shame is a visceral feeling of humiliation and disgust toward one's own body and identity as a sexual being, and a belief of being abnormal, inferior, and unworthy. This feeling can be internalized, but it also manifests in interpersonal relationships, having a negative impact on trust, communication, and physical and emotional intimacy. Sexual shame develops across the lifespan in interactions with interpersonal relationships, one's culture and society, and subsequent critical self-appraisal. So what that means is it first happens between me and usually an infant, between me and someone else, so I get in trouble, and then it begins slowly, this internal critic that happens, and then it happens again between me and someone else that I love, and then it reinforces that internal critic, and that feedback loop gets stronger and stronger and stronger as I develop. And that goes on to say, there is also a fear and uncertainty related to one's power or right to make decisions, including safety decisions related to sexual encounters, along with an internalized judgment toward one's own sexual desire. So the way that that plays out and the way that we see it most is like, you can have a young person, a young woman in particular, we see this a lot, who'll feel confident in every area of her life until she gets ready to go out. And then she'll put down 3, 4, 5 shots of hard liquor because she's not sure that she can keep herself safe or that she has the right to keep herself safe. And this is, you don't have to come from a religious background for us to see this. This came out in research in Peggy Ornstein's 2017 book that was called Girls and Sex, Navigating the New Landscape. And we saw this there. She interviewed 80 girls, 15 to 22, and they described this. You know, they were doing fine everywhere else until they got ready to go out. And they just didn't know that they could even say, stop, I don't want to, or stop, or knew that they could, or knew that they could keep themselves safe. And this is the rape culture that all girls know that they are in, you know, and boys, even good kids, don't know where the line is, like don't know what is consent, where consent is, right? So this is how rampant sexual shame is, and how it really, I don't think there's any other core way that we damage people's ability to attach and create strong bonds of intimacy than here with sexual shame.
Sure. This is so strong and powerful. I feel energy moving throughout my body because it resonates on such a deep level. I know that with my personal story, I definitely had so much shame carrying around, coming from sexual abuse and even having pleasure. You know, I've shared that before. I had an orgasm when my clitoris was stimulated by my stepfather when I was 9 years old. And that brought so much shame and wired my entire sexuality with just shame. That was the prominent feeling around my sexuality. There was no pleasure even. I couldn't access pleasure. So I totally resonate. And I really think that this sexual shame is in the core of the issues, of the planetary issues. I really think that this is our life force energy that is so mutated with shame, and yeah, that creates so many ripples and so many affects every single thing in society. And I'm sure you see it a lot in your work.
I agree. Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. You know, it stifles all the core creative energy, the core sexual energy, the core life force energy, and really is the energy that often I think leads people into suicide, you know, when they feel covered in shame. Mm-hmm. You know, and then when you watch people sort of release themselves from shame, you watch them release themselves into life and into life force and into life energy and into sexual pleasure and into really being able to honor themselves and make honoring choices for themselves in so many areas of their life, sexuality only being one of those areas, you know. So it really is this place of a real dichotomy, whether they're living, you know, in so many ways, or whether they're dying in so many ways.
Yeah, exactly. And so the question that arises now is, how do we rise above this shame? How do we drop it? How do we move away? How do we break through it? What is your advice on that?
Yeah. it took me 11 years to write my book because there were so many core questions that I needed to answer to understand how we had actually in many ways become more sexually shaming in the 30, 40 years since my adolescence, actually, because some of this was not my personal story. I'd grown up in a Swedish immigrant home that was very sex positive, so I didn't understand what had happened because I had had so many students and so many clients that had grown up in much, much more sexually shaming environments, since we had done abstinence only education across the United States and just awful things. So I just needed to understand, had Western religion ever been sex positive? Had there ever been sex positivity ever, along the Western religious line in Hebrew mystic thinking? I just needed to understand things better, right? And so I just asked so many questions. Well, while I was doing all of that research, I was still treating people and listening to people and looking at things. And as I was doing that, I ended up developing an evidence-based model for healing sexual shame. And I call it Healing the Mess, the model for erasing sexual shame, MESS. And there are really 4 areas, and it's not linear, it's circular. You're working them all the time. And in some ways, they're kind of pragmatic because it's like, kind of peeling things away, because shame can kind of get inside your cells and kind of stick like tar. So you kind of have to work it out of you, kind of unraveling things. So the first thing for so many people is to separate myth from reality. And that is what I call, it's frame, name, claim, and aim. So frame is get yourself a scaffolding or a frame of sex education. Find out what is true about the brilliance of your body and how it really operates, because it is magnificent and wonderful, and you need to understand it, because we're given so much mythology about how it really operates, and about gender and just anatomy and physiology and all kinds of things. And we have wonderful resources out there. So learn about your body and the body of the people that you're attracted to, and how relationships go and intimacy goes and all of those kinds of things, and come to appreciate your body and pleasure and how you in particular are put together, and that kind of leads to name, come to know your story and find a tribe of people that are safe and compassionate and empathic to tell your story to. And that's how I got to put together the thankgodforsex.org website. Was I found in talking to some of my students and clients that they weren't telling anybody about their story, and yet their stories fell on the realm of normal, right? They were all unique and yet normative, right? And they felt so alone. And I thought, you're not alone. Your stories are beautiful, and yet you're feeling somehow perverted, and yet they're beautiful. And I thought, if you could know that your story is wonderful and you're not alone, you would feel like you could accept yourself more. And so I found, students and grads of mine that had done some therapy and done some work and were getting to a place where they were beginning to feel good about their stories. And I'm like, come over to my place. Let's start recording video of you telling your story. We'd open some wine and they'd start telling their story. And so I took the model from the It Gets Better project that Dan Savage and his partner Terry Miller started, of gay folks who had made it through high school without killing themselves. And they had put videos up. And so we borrowed that idea and we started doing the same thing. So people could go to a website and hear people telling their story about sexual shame and surviving it and getting to a place of saying, I'm thanking God for sex. I'm thanking God for me and my body and pleasure, and you could go hear people and go, oh my gosh, I'm fine. I'm good, And so actually finding a tribe of people and starting to tell your story, and that's so liberating, to go, I'm good, I'm good. So that's name. Claim is starting to claim your body. We get upwards of 3,000 messages a day through advertisements that we are not okay, and that's to drive our economy, right? Like all kinds of people are making money off of that. That's bullshit. We are good. Our bodies are good, and they are not meant to all look the same. They are meant to look different. We are a cornucopia of beauty, and our bodies are supposed to be different. And we need to change this idea that beauty is one thing, because beauty is not one thing. But we have to work so hard at that. So we have to gather around and say, you are beautiful. I love this about you, and I love this about you. And we have to work hard with that. So claiming our bodies is about learning to stand in front of the mirror every day until we can start saying, this is beautiful, this is beautiful, this is beautiful. And I am not going to wait until I am dying to say, I appreciate this body and how it has carried me in the world, how it has allowed me to love and hold and be in the world in a way that I can appreciate my life. I'm going to start doing that now, today, now. So that's frame, name, claim. And as we do those three things diligently, mindfully, every day, we begin to aim. That's really writing a new legacy. We're aiming for a new future, a new sexual legacy that leaves shame behind. And as we do that, we actually write a new future for ourselves and any child that is related to us. We don't pass this forward anymore, and they no longer carry shame. And I know this because having Swedish and Northern European immigrant, relatives, they live very differently. They don't have shame because they grow up continuing to be like they are as children, where their bodies are good. They're like, this is a good body and sexuality is good. And, there's a book written by a researcher who grew up in Holland. She compared growing up in Holland to what it's like to grow up in America around sexuality. And her book is called Not Under My Roof. Her name is Amy Shallett. Holland has the best sex education. It's comprehensive, from 3-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And 93% of adolescent young adults in Holland will tell you that their very first sexual experience was a good one, and their parents knew about it. They discussed it with their parents. You will get nothing like that here in America. And research shows that if your first experience is a good one, it amounts to having much more satisfying sexual experiences as adults. So we all want that for our children, and yet we have such a hard time doing that, giving comprehensive sex education here in America. So I really have a vision for us moving towards that. And part of that is, learning to get rid of our sexual shame.
Wow. This is it. I mean, this is exactly where I'd like to see humanity moving towards. And I love your frame of work of really working that wiring, those neuropathic connections to change them in the brain, because it's possible. The brain has that neuroelasticity. It can change, It can grow new connections, and nothing is set in stone. So it's really that continuous work with consciousness and awareness and knowing that this shame is not ours. It's not ours to keep. It has been put on us. And then I've said that before, but I want to say it here because the content is so relevant. And that is, shame is the fear of disconnection. And one of our primal needs are for connection. And sex is probably the most intimate powerful way for connection. There is no better way to feel connected than in that intimate relationship. And by holding our stories away because we afraid to share them because of shame, that's exactly what hinder our ability to get rid of it. So by sharing our stories, by putting it out there and seeing that we still loved, and even maybe more because we come vulnerable and we share our humanity and our most inner inner treasures with others, and that really what sets the freedom. That's what creates the freedom from shame. So I love your community, and I love how you structure it where people can come and share with each other. I think this is really powerful, really, really powerful.
Yeah. You're right on. That's exactly how we get there. Yep.
Right. And I really would like you to talk a little bit about the connection of sexuality and spirituality, because this is such a missing link. In our society, and it needs to be brought back together. So I would like to know your take on it.
I love that question, and I think I was surprised by that connection, and I learned it through my clients. And I remember as a very, very young clinician, like in my late 20s, and working with people who had experienced childhood sexual abuse, and realizing that that they were hurt not in just their bodies, and not just emotionally, that it was different than people that were hurt with physical abuse, that they were somehow hurt in their soul. And I remember that there was one of the people that I had been studying with, Chloe Madonis at the time, she was a family therapist, and she had developed a treatment model for working with adolescent sex offenders. And she actually had them say that to the people that they had perpetrated against. So if it was like a cousin who had perpetrated against someone, that they would actually say, I hurt you in your soul. And when I heard that said out loud, it was like, it just resonated so deeply, because that wasn't usually done in trainings, right? And it was like, that is what I have seen. That is what I have seen. And so I remember integrating that in my work, honoring the fact that we have hurt you deeply, that there is some intricate connection in between our sexuality and our spirituality. We may not entirely understand it, but it's there. It's there. Well, years later, this was when I was in the middle of writing my book. And I could see how, with the purity movement and how we had, so in the purity movement and abstinence only movement that happened in the United States, when we told people don't have sex until marriage, but then we also told them don't think about sex and don't desire sex, and we put rings on them, and we started telling them that at 9 and 10. And that we told them that they could do that it was possible to do that, to not think, be pure in mind, heart, and body. That's what we told them. And then we made them think that if they could not do that something was profoundly wrong with them, that they were impure people, right?
Yeah.
And so this shame went so deep inside of them. And so it caused them to have all the symptoms of somebody who had been abused sexually as a child. So I saw this same deep wounding in their soul that I saw with people who had been sexually abused. So as I was writing my book, the first rendition of my book ended up being too academic. I sent it to a bunch of colleagues, and they're like, are you trying to write an academic book? And I said, no, I'm not. And they're like, well, you did. So I put it on the shelf, and I ended up running couples retreats for a while, so I could really watch what people were responding to, because I wanted the book to really work in people's hands. Like I wanted people to find themselves in the book. So I ran these couples retreat, really thinking I would run them only for a few years till I got what I needed from watching people respond. Well, we had things teaching people, you know, how culture had affected them and how you know, gender affects people, and you know, yeah, the stuff that you don't get, you know, that teaches you about relationships. So we did all that. But and we had gender split groups, so you could talk with women, could talk to women, and men could talk to men. But in the afternoon, we had what we called passion practices. And we took, this was for straight couples, because they were the ones having the worst sex, right? So we took intercourse off the table. And we did giver-receiver exercises, so men could learn how to touch women out intercourse. And women could learn how to touch men and really show up vulnerably to each other, mindfully to each other, right? Super scary. And here's what I ended up learning. I learned that those exercises ended up being the primary healing component to the deepest attachment wounds that these couples had. So I had couples that had not touched in a decade, were cold as ice. They wanted their marriages to work, but they had no spark at all, hadn't had them for years, thought they didn't love each other, whatever, right? And walking into those sacred touch exercises healed those things. There was a deep, this is where I learned, again, the other side. There's a deep connection between spirituality and sexuality. These touch exercises, these sacred touch exercises, healed these deep, deep wounds inside where they thought love no longer existed. And I thought to myself, there it is. It's the other side of where sexuality can hurt you deeply spiritually. Sexuality can heal you deeply spiritually. And I just saw it right in front of my eyes. And I don't know that I entirely understand it, but I've seen it. I've seen it. So there's something deeply spiritual in our sexuality and something deeply spiritual in our sexuality. I mean, they're both there. And I don't know that I entirely understand it, but I think there's something sacred in it. But we have to, and this was part of what I found when I did my research. On the Hebrew line, there's all kinds of stories that show that if you bring mindfulness, you bring your eyes, your intention, your attention to your partner, and you're there in body, mind, soul, and spirit, you'll keep your desire alive. It won't turn to dust. The way they talk about it in Hebrew, it won't turn to dust. And of course, most of the couples that come where there's a desire discrepancy, it's because they've been treating their sex life in a cavalier way. And desire for at least one partner has turned to dust. And when I discovered that, along with many other things, I thought, this is an ancient wisdom.
Wow, so beautiful. And I mean, yeah, it's for me, it's so clear that every person is divine, and connecting so intimately with another person, it's inviting the divine into your space. This is a channel that you can actually meet the divine in the most intimate way, if we look at that way, right? Because the eyes are the gateway of the soul, and each soul is sacred, and to bring that that awareness into the lovemaking space, that intention already has the power to change the experience.
Exactly. Right? That's exactly right. You're bringing all of that into all of your touch, right? And everything is there, right? It changes the whole experience.
Right.
Yeah, but you have to bring it. Like you have to bring that intention. If you don't, you'll miss it, right? And that's what blows the couples away because they're like, I didn't know I could have this experience. It's so wonderful to watch them, discover it. They could have been together for 20 years and never had that experience.
Wow. It's also very inspiring to know that it's possible to tap there no matter where you are, no matter how old you are or how long have you been in a relationship. It's always possible to tap into that mystery of
Yeah.
sacred connection.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's so hopeful. It's so hopeful.
And there's also something I know from my own experience. For many years, I was really having sex from here upwards, really just in my mind, running fantasies and things that turn me on and running it in my mind. And even if I had an orgasm, it was like a genital sneeze and it came and went away and actually left me feeling quite empty. And when I learned to bring mindfulness and really sink into my body, into the sensation, into the senses, and open myself up, open my capacity to receive pleasure as well as give. I feel that it's a whole other game changer. It's a whole other experience. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so many people will tell you that when they learn to do that, it's a completely different experience. It's a full being, full body experience. It's not focal, in one way. And until you know to do that, until you experience that, you don't know what you're capable of.
Yeah, exactly. And I would like you to speak a little bit. We don't have much time left, unfortunately, because I really enjoy our conversation, but to speak a little bit about raising kids and how to raise them shame-free, how to model them a healthy model of sexuality.
Yeah. So with little ones, it can be so fun. The thing that gets in our way, again, is shame. Right. And it's from how we got imprinted when we were little. So, but you can get over it. So, you want to, if you can, start when they're really little. And I have a friend that says, there's no such thing as starting too soon. In fact, start when you're pregnant, by just pretending that you're talking to your child already, because what you want to get to is the point that you're so comfortable that when the time comes, you've been talking about it so much that your shame is gone. Right? Because that's the part we want to get to. We want to get to where it's like we're talking about spaghetti and brushing your teeth and putting your boots on and your coat on and whatever. It's just so natural because this is all part of our body. It's part of the human experience. And as we're able to talk about it like that, like this is a good part of our life and part of our body and blah, 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 that the child will be able to see it as also part of that too. But we have to work it through our plasticity. We have to work it through our body mind, right? So you want, the phrase I use is 100 1-minute conversations. So it's more like 1,000 really, but you're having them all the time and it's age appropriate as your child is growing up. So you want to know what is natural curiosity for a child at every age and stage, okay? And so I'll have something for your listeners that will give them all the information about what children are curious about at different ages and stages. But you want to know what they're going to do, and you want to have the books around the house about what they are curious about doing. And now we have so many good information that you don't even have to know what to say. The books will help you know what to say, and they have all the great pictures and all that. And you want to have those books ahead of time so you've read them so many times that the words just roll right off your tongue. So when you feel the shame rise up in you, just keep talking until you feel the shame, eventually feel like it's moving itself through you. right? Because all of this stuff is good, it's normal, it's natural. If the book says that this is appropriate for the child to learn at this age, it is right. It is. Children are hearing things so often at school. They want to hear it from you first. And they want to know that this is good and natural and all of that. So you want to be their sex educator. You want to be their resource person. Research shows that if kids get age-appropriate sex education across their lifespan from their parents, they're going to get involved with sex later than normal. They're going to get involved later. They're going to make safer sexual choices that are more respectful to them. They're going to have a better sex life when they are older. So lower teen pregnancy rates, lower STI rates, all of that. And they're going to describe themselves as closer to their parents overall. So I'm always saying to parents, the best guarantee that your child is going to want to stay connected to you through their youth is to become a good sex educator. Because if they can talk to you about sexuality, they can talk to you about anything, right? And so now we can't wait for them to get their information out there. We've got to be ahead of them, saying, okay, so here's some of the things that might happen. I want you to be aware of it, and I want you to come and talk to me about it, because some of that stuff out there just isn't going to be true. You know, it's going to be fantasy, or it's going to be kind of goofy, you know, and so I want to talk about it first here. And so here's some books. We're going to go through them. We're going to talk about them. And I want you to feel equipped, kind of like, you know, like a strong person, you know, and so that you know what's true and what's not true, what's goofy or whatever, you know. And so, but you've been going through it yourself ahead of time. And that's how you do it. That's how they do it in all the other countries.
Right. This is so important. It is so vital for the next generation. We really now transitioning into a whole new era, and yeah, so important.
Yeah, it is. Hi.
Right. So just 1 second.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah. So I know that leads us to your gift. Yeah, would you like to share what is this free gift that you're sharing with us?
Yeah, so I have on my website a free download that is a normative child development chart, and it shows what kids naturally are curious about having to do with sexual development from in utero all the way to age 20. And so you can download that, and if you've got kids that you're raising, it'll show you what they're going to be curious about and what you need to be prepared for, you know, so that you can stay ahead of them. And you can always go to my Instagram account, which is at Dr. Tina Shameless Sex. And I have a little circle that says resources, and that recommends all kinds of books that you can get to stay ahead of the game with your kids. And if you just do that, you're in good shape. Yeah.
So beautiful. It's such an important topic. I actually feel like creating a whole summit just on that. You know, I have a teenage daughter now, and another daughter growing, and I'm so passionate about it. So
yeah.
Thank you for your work. And if a woman wants to work with you directly, how can they get hold of you?
Well, so I mostly do training and supervision now, helping people add sex therapy, or, you know, become sexually equipped as therapists. But we have a whole team of people that we work with. And so you go to the Northwest Institute on Intimacy, or NWIOI.com. And that's how you get a hold of me. Or TinaSchermerSellers.com is another way to get a hold of me. So if they want to do supervision around sex therapy, that's the way you get me.
Oh, so there you go. Thank you so much, Tina, for being here and for your shared wisdom. It is so appreciated, and I'm Sure. I'm so grateful for who you are and your voice in the world. It is so needed now. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for this good work as well.
And yeah, for everyone else, thank you for being here, and ciao until the next time. All my love.